Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football, and you are watching Take 5 with Steven Travers. And today we've got a guest, Steven, that oddly enough is a part of his own media group. He understands broadcasting. He understands everything about the intricacies of each and every plug and how to put them in so that you can broadcast a game or a show. And unfortunately, we're having technical difficulties, so we don't get to have him on because there's something that isn't working right. But Jake Downey is our guest today. Steven, you know Jake for quite a while, and I should know Jake. He went to a rival high school just right down the road from where I went back in the day. But he's an Emmy Award-winning veteran of broadcasting and production works. And Jake Downey is our special guest today. Steven, please introduce.
Yeah, thanks, Harper. I've known Jake Downey for many years. I'm good friends with his entire family. His son, Charlie, actually played water polo at your alma mater of Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks. Jake is like you, Harper. He's from the San Fernando Valley. I met him when I was writing for Street Zebra magazine because I did a lot of high school stuff, and he just became a very good friend. He's a friend of my family. He did the videography of my daughter's wedding. And Jake is currently on the East Coast because his son Charlie is playing at water polo at Long Island University, and Jake is like touring all of his son's water polo events up and down the East Coast, from New York to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and beyond. But Jake, we don't have you. We're not looking at you, but we have you on our phone. And so I want to welcome you to Take 5 with Steven Travers.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Steve. You and I have talked on air and off air forever, and I love doing shows with you and talking sports with you. And when we get together, telling lies and consuming adult beverages. Not that anyone ever does that. And thanks for teaming me up with Charlie. I'll just brag on him for a minute because all parents want to brag on their kids. But we are on the East Coast. Nicole, my wife, and I are working during the week in our little apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey, with our dogs. Had to mention the dogs. And then on weekends, yes, we go watch Charlie play. We were actually on the West Coast the last week because LIU took their one trip on a plane and went to California to play 3 games in LA and then 2 in the Bay Area. And it was a pleasure to go home, sleep in my own bed, and reconnect with family. And actually, we hosted the whole team for a barbecue at our house. And I would say that was the highlight.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So you're really having quite an adventure on the East Coast. Watching your son. Oddly enough, Charlie plays at Long Island University, but they have a Brooklyn satellite campus, and that's where Charlie is. I actually went there and took Charlie to a dinner, and I was just amazed at what Brooklyn looks like these days, because the last time I'd been in Brooklyn was like in the 1980s, and not to mention Hoboken, New Jersey, and Jersey City. I actually played in a night basketball league when I lived in New York for a while. And it's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, if you bought property in downtown Brooklyn or in Hoboken in the 80s or 90s, you'd be sitting on some gold, because the way it's become gentrified and property values have risen, you keep hearing from people who've lived there a long time, hey, yeah, you didn't want to walk these streets back in the 80s and 90s. And now, there's young families pushing baby carts and dogs, and it's become completely gentrified. Even some of Mike Tyson's roughest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, have become newly remodeled, and that's now a hot neighborhood. But hey, I'm enjoying living here. I haven't lived anywhere besides LA in 28 years, so a change of pace is good. I'm surprised how much I like being here, and the combination of doing stories, exploring the city with my wife, and then going to see Charlie play on the weekends has been an awesome combination. And I don't mind telling you that I had a heart attack last year, and that's kind of reordered my priorities. I in my remaining of time on earth, I want to see the people I care about. I want to go places and see things and do things. I'm working on a show called Everyday Heroes, where we're profiling people doing good out in the world, selfless good deeds. And that fits with my new ethos of, wanting to tell good stories about good people.
Wow. What an interesting background. Thank you for sharing that. I know there's a lot of reflection, I guess you could say, but you know what? The thing that I got out of what you just mentioned is, look, I don't know how much time I have left. I'm going to live every day the fullest that I possibly can. Were you doing that before, but just in a different manner, Jake? Or is this something that obviously this is a new rekindling for you in terms of, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of things rather than let them take advantage of me.
No, it scared me. I've been overweight most of my adult life. I eat too much and don't exercise enough. I could sugarcoat that a lot of different ways, but that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I've upped my physical conditioning and lowered my intake, and I'm down just about 30 pounds since the day of my heart attack in July of 24. And I wanted it. You know what? Something like this forces you to realize what's important. You can't just continue life as it was.
Mm.
So this is part of that. And I would just encourage your viewers and listeners, and I'm sorry that I'm just a black screen in this discussion, but I would just encourage everybody to go out and seize the day and to enjoy the people in your life and to go see a variety of what the world has to offer, something different than what your day-to-day is. And if that means getting in the car and going and seeing something a few miles from where you live, great. If you can get on a plane and go, quite a ways away, go do that. The places that have always interested you and you haven't gone. And I say that acknowledging that life is hard and people are not overwhelmed with resources to just go do things at a moment's notice, or even if they can plan it out. Life is expensive. But I would encourage everyone in their own way to seize the day.
Yeah. I greatly value that. And unfortunately for you, it took a heart attack. Well, I won't say it took one, but because of the heart attack, you now approach life a little bit differently. Tell me a little bit about Charlie, your son. I know that Los Angeles, especially the Mission Viejo area, is a swimming mecca, right? There's Olympians that train there during and off season all the time. Was that something that was important for you, or when did he discover swimming and his joy in the pool?
Well, it really happened because he was a small fry when he walked into Notre Dame, which is a baseball power. And, right now they have two big leaguers, Hunter Green and Giancarlo Stanton, but they have a long roster of big leaguers in the past, including Pat Gillick, who's in the Baseball Hall of Fame as an executive. And Tim Foley, and there's others that I'm not remembering. But anyways, the point is that that Notre Dame is a baseball power. And when he walked into high school in ninth grade, he was 5'1" and 100 pounds. And unless you have Jose Altuve promise when you're that small, get me some fully grown young men here. I mean, when I was in ninth grade, I was about 5'10" and 160. And if Charlie was of my frame at that time, the coaches might have looked at him differently. Now, I have to say he's since sprouted to a solid 6'3" and 200. But what happened in high school was he rolls over to water polo, scores 2 goals in his first JV game, and he's hooked. And he's on a team and playing a game for the first time, but he had the strong right arm from pitching in baseball, and that certainly translated in water polo. And he struggled with the conditioning at first, but kept at it. It didn't quit because, it certainly is easy to quit. And he played there for 4 years, got through COVID, was, captain as a senior and their leading goal scorer, and became the first scholarship water polo athlete in 6 years at Sherman Oaks, Notre Dame. And so we actually hosted a signing day event for him at our house and invited everyone connected to Charlie. And that was a great day. And I say that because as a sports reporter, I've attended signing days for other people's kids for like 25 years. And Steve, I'm sure you've been to signing day too. And I was not going to let the opportunity pass for Charlie to have his own signing day. We thought that was a big honking deal to be able to have a signing day at our house.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, Jake, because you and I attended, I guess you could kind of call it a signing day of a sort. Back in 2012, we did a whole big program on Sports Stars of Tomorrow with Jared Goff. And I knew his dad, Jerry, and so we went to his house. And at that time, Jared was appearing on that ESPN show that featured best high school quarterbacks. And it's funny, he was like,
Elite 11.
Yeah, and he was like maybe the 12th best high school rated quarterback in the country at the time. If you look at all the quarterbacks who were in that show subsequently, he did better than all of them in college and obviously in the pros. But that was a great program that we did, and it was a lot of fun to get to know Jared Goff.
Yeah, that's still, of all the pieces I've done for Sports Stars of Tomorrow, and that's another show that I worked on for the same group in Dallas that produces Everyday Heroes that I've been talking about. Jared Goff is still the biggest star I've profiled on Sports Stars. Also got Dory Jackson. If you're an NBA fan, I got Aaron Gordon when he was at Archbishop Mitty.
Sure.
And a recent one was a personal favorite for me that ran both on Everyday Heroes and Sports Stars. And this was a kid named Charlie Cooper, who's the son of a friend of mine from LA. And Charlie is a wheelchair tennis stud who won 4 Grand Slams in juniors, U.S. and Aussie singles, and then Aussie and French doubles. And he just turned pro, and he's competing against grown men in the wheelchair division of men's tennis, which, thanks to what's usually a bad word, DEI, these guys earn prize money now, and good for them. And I can tell you, having gone to the U.S. Open this year, there were a lot of people who were of varying disabilities who wanted to go support their heroes playing wheelchair tennis, and it was really delightful to see.
Wow. Jason, I have a question for you regarding and this probably hits home for you personally in a level that you can describe a lot more thoroughly. There are some kids that are small in high school and they grow and they develop and they turn into, they go from a ugly duckling to a swan in whatever the sport is. Now, yours was swimming and water polo for your son. Does it ever get old writing about these stories or being able to describe them or broadcast certain kids that have overcome a lot of different things just where they weren't ready at 14 or 16 or maybe even at 18, but at 22 or 24, they are the best in the world in some respects, or at least some of the best in the category that they've been put into, whether it be baseball, basketball, you name it, anything. You get to see this in your own life. Tell me what that's like for you, seeing it again in other different areas, but then bring it home to what it means for you to go, I watched this guy, fed him. I watched him go from 5'0" to 6'3", and now he's a stud and he's playing at the collegiate level. Describe that a little bit for us.
Well, I would, but I'm all puddled, so you got me thinking about his journey. And I honestly never thought we would have a collegiate athlete in the family. I thought when baseball ended for Charlie at Notre Dame that, water polo would be this cute little thing that he did for 4 years, and then he'd go off to college. And that he found his place, that he found his team is just something that I'm ecstatic about. And in private moments, I'm just overcome with emotion. And I can tell you that Charlie prevailed upon the athletic department at LIU saying, hey, my dad's a broadcaster. And he got me hired to announce the home games for the league streaming service. So on the first weekend in October, I announced 3 home games for LIU against Harvard, Brown, and MIT. And in the first game against Brown, Charlie scored 4 goals on his birthday. And so I can't begin to tell you how hard it was for me to keep my composure on the air when my own kid is putting it in the net again and again, a hat trick and then 4. I mean, there were a couple times when the talented and beautiful young lady who was my color analyst who plays on the women's team, Liv Booth, where she knew that I was kind of breaking down and she had to step in and talk because it is a uncommon experience to announce your own kids' games, not just for, your own private video collection, but for a global audience. I mean, we have people listening and watching in Europe and in Australia where we have players and all around the States. So that is where my 2 worlds collided in a way in which it was hard to separate being a dad and being a broadcaster, because I really do pride myself on being able to keep it together in any situation. I mean, that's what's expected of you if you're going to be a broadcaster. You can't just be a big ball of mush. But I would say in a couple of instances on that weekend that I was a big ball of much. So that's afterwards where I just started to consider how unique and fortunate I was to be there, not just to witness it, but to announce it. And for Charlie to perform so beautifully in that moment. And I haven't really talked about it like this publicly, and I'm glad you guys are giving me the forum to do so. But it was really a moment, even in recounting, where I'm kind of losing my cookies too. I don't think too many people get that opportunity. So don't make the mistake that I don't appreciate it. I'm very appreciative that I was given the opportunity, and then Charlie did his part by scoring 4 goals in one game and 6 on the weekend. It was an awesome weekend. And then just to put a cherry on top, and that made it even better. And then I ended up at an Oktoberfest celebration with LIU, and we celebrated some more. So it was an awesome weekend that I hope I've done justice to describing, because all of life is little moments, and I keep telling my buddies about that, and maybe I appreciate how unique it is because they're gobsmacked at how cool that is. So maybe I just need to keep telling that story, because that was just an A+ dad moment. Father and son moment.
Yeah, no kidding. And you're doing it while on the air. I mean, there's no executive director telling you, hey, keep it together, Jake, keep it together. Your son's scoring, but we got a show to do. No, you're just had the emotion of being a dad, as you mentioned, and then having it be your son that's excelling. Now, you're not overlooking any of the other kids that are playing. Obviously, the ones that do well, you're going to let everybody know. But what a great moment for you, and a very special one. Obviously, very unique that you get to put both those worlds together.
Oh, thank you. And no, you're right. I definitely, especially for LIU, got everybody's name in and told some backstories. Usually with the visiting teams, Brown, Harvard, MIT, I stuck to what was on the roster, the class, the hometown, the high school. But even then, I was able to say, from MIT, like the first 2 guys in the game were from schools in San Diego County. And, being an LA guy, I know those high schools because I've covered high school forever. And so I could throw in those little tidbits. And yeah, I mean, I guess I was the hometown announcer who was more excited about LIU than the visitors, but that's fairly natural. I mean, I've been listening to some hometown radio during the baseball playoffs, and they're not too happy when their team loses, but they're over the moon excited when their team wins.
Yeah, happens all the time. Hey, you mentioned the broadcasting. Tell us a little bit about how that started for you. When did the passion for the games, at whatever level, high school especially though, when did that become something that was important for you to where you want to do it and you want to stick with it and really turn it into a career?
Well, I always watched local news and read the newspaper. My parents read the LA Times to me at a young age. And, not just the sports page, but when I was a kid, the first baseball season I started following was the 74 Dodgers season that ended with them losing to the A's. And I was listening to as much of Vin Scully as I could before my mom would make me go to sleep. And then I would read the newspaper the next day for the box score. And that fueled a lifetime unhealthy or healthy obsession. My mom and dad would probably say unhealthy obsession with the Dodgers and with baseball. And to take it a step further, I thought I was going to replace Steve Garvey at first base for the Dodgers, being a lefty. But the curveball intervened, and I was an average high school player, so I have no illusions. Like some kids say, if it wasn't for that coach, I could have been somebody. Well, no, there was a limit to my talent. I was not Steve Travers. I was not offered a college scholarship. I did not play professionally. My athletic journey ended in high school, so I was pretty clear-eyed about that. And I thought that the best way to stay in sports was to talk about it on television. I watched a lot of the local sports guys in LA, Stu Mahan, who was famous from like the Pastime at Ridgemont High and also from the Rocky series where he announced boxing. Stu Mahan was a local guy in LA. Fred Rogan was the guy at Channel 4. Jim Hill was on the air at Channel 2. Jim Hill is still there, approaching 80 years old. He played in the NFL. I'll just put it this way. He was in the NFL so long ago, it was like he played for the Packers like 3 years after Lombardi left. Anyways, I watched all these guys on local TV and I said, I want to do that. And when I went to San Diego State, I majored in journalism and in political science. And I worked at the school paper, and I had an internship under the great Jim Laslovic, who is a retired sportscaster at the NBC station in San Diego and is my mentor. And Jim played in the NFL for 10 years with the Lions, Packers, and Chargers, I believe. He also played at Penn State for Joe Paterno, and his defensive coordinator was Jerry Sandusky, which is another story. But I'm not hinting at anything. He was one of the first people that said Sandusky has to go, and so does Paterno. Anyways, Jim was my mentor and looked out for me in the early days, and I was one of the few interns of his, if not the only one for quite a few years, that got on the air. And I was determined to be a sportscaster and work at local stations. Play-by-play did not come to me till later, probably in my 40s. I was a studio guy. I was the guy working at the local affiliate in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Santa Maria, California, Austin, Texas, and then LA. And most of those stations, by coincidence, were CBS stations. But I really learned the trade in 4 years at the CBS station in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I still have a lot of friends from that time. I covered the University of Wyoming, football and basketball and other sports extensively. And, I thought I was ready to make a jump to the big time because I'd see guys my age, let's say like Rich Eisen on ESPN. How come I'm not that guy? And other guys who elevated to the worldwide leader at a young age. But if I look at my tapes from that time, I was not ready. I was still terrified of the mic. I was not as cool and suave and debonair as I thought I was. So I bounced around. In Cheyenne, I need to point out that I qualified for food stamps with the amount of money I made. I mean, I was on television every day, and I started at $13,000 a year and worked my way up to $15,000 after 4 years of raises. So They paid you that little because they could. Anyways, I went to Santa Maria, north of Santa Barbara, south of San Luis Obispo, on the West Coast, another CBS station, and I spent 2 years there. And then I went to a station in San Luis Obispo that was startup, and I was offered twice the money and the chance to be the voice of Cal Poly Sports, and it was a good gig. The problem is the company wasn't backed by a big broadcasting. The station wasn't backed by a big broadcasting company. It was backed by a guy named Jack who didn't have any money, and he just turned in to be a Shylock. He was a shyster. He was taking money from local businesses in return for future considerations, and there were no future considerations because he was a shyster who was out of money. And so I never went on the air at that station, and I was really desperate to get back on the air. And I went to Texas and started kicking down doors, and I got hired at the CBS station in Austin. And I was stoked to be there, and I would have stayed for a long time and covered high school football in Texas and the Texas Longhorns and all the pro teams there, like the Cowboys and Astros, Rangers, blah, blah, blah. And then I got hired. I got offered a chance to come home and do a weekly show about high school sports on the CBS station in Los Angeles. And I had to take it. I had to come home. I had to be where my parents could see me on TV. For its time, that was awesome because suddenly I didn't have to send my parents videotapes anymore. They could watch me on the air once a week. And it was appointment viewing for my family. And one of the best birthday parties I ever had, my 31st birthday, my dad had a party where I was hosting the show. And since it was taped, I could be there. And we had like 200 people there at my dad's house, my friends and my parents' friends. And it was like a validation of the difficult road that I took, that I was hosting a show in Los Angeles. And I know it gave my parents immense pride. So, of course, because it was such a great gig and I loved it and it was the best job of my life, it had to go away. It lasted for 5 years, but in the soft advertising market after 9/11, it just went kaput. We didn't have enough sponsors. And I tried to bring it back locally under my own production company banner, but it didn't work. The dollars just weren't there. And so, I plunged myself into production and taking whatever clients I could find, mostly sports, but not completely. I also worked at local affiliates as a news writer and a news producer. But once I had kids, it was really not feasible for me to be working overnight, which is when I was working a lot. That's where they put the new arrivals, is working overnight for the morning shows, which is just hell on the body. So since then, again, I took random gigs with my production company, started a few YouTube pages, and then Max Preps came along, and I was their first video correspondent in Los Angeles from 2007 to 2014, which was fun because they didn't give me any editorial input. They just said, "We trust you to go get games and stories." And I had complete editorial autonomy to do what I thought was right. And that was awesome. So, of course, that didn't last because when they lost their sponsors, that went away. So I could still submit stories to Max Preps, and some schools would hire me to, "Hey, we want to be on Max Preps," and they'd hire me to cover their games or do a feature, but I didn't have regular income coming from Max Preps, and that was kind of a bummer. So, you guys know the transitory nature of television and production. Nothing ever lasts forever. So, I'm fortunate in recent years to have walked into, a freelance gig, but pretty regular with Everyday Heroes. And it certainly aligns with what I'm looking to do these days in spotlighting good people doing good things. And so I'm also working on a documentary about my family, and my grandfather's immigration story in particular. And if you guys will have me back another time, I can fill a whole hour telling you that tale.
Well, Jake, yes, we would love to have you on again. We know that you're kind of strapped for time as at the current moment. But real quick, it sounds to me from where you've been and what you went through. And I think all of us can find that there are some times where you got to be the one to take out the trash. You're the one that has to get the duct tape out and put the wires up against the wall and make sure the mics work and that the lights are on and everything is plugged in. And not just from a television perspective. You've been at the nuts and bolts. You've done everything that needs to be taken care of, both in front of and the back of the camera. I'm sure that helped you when you decided to go on your own and put JD Media Group together. That had to be a great plus for your resume to be able to say, I've done all this stuff. I know how to do it. And now I want to do it for myself.
I do. I started the company in 2000, and it's been essentially a conduit for me, having bigger productions than myself. And it's mostly an accounting mechanism, but yes, you're right. And having every skill you have helps you. But I also recognize my limitations and bring in shooters and editors in particular, and sometimes talent that complement me. And one last thing, I just need to give kudos to my awesome wife, Nicole, because frankly, I'd be living under a freeway if it wasn't for her. I mean, she's killing it in private practice as a psychologist. And, what I'm doing in the television space is gum money. So let's hear it for the hardworking moms out there.
Yeah, it's always good to do that. Thank you for including Nicole, and her 9 to 5 helps take care of some of the great stuff that you're able to do otherwise. Thank you for mentioning that. There's a value in that. You mentioned that you've got some shows coming up. I know you need to go, so I want to be respectful of your time. What is in the future for you? What is something that really, aside from the documentary you want to do on your family, is there a portion of the sports world that you still have untapped and want to get into?
I've got some ideas. I want to, other than doing Everyday Heroes when those stories fall into my lap, I want to finish off this documentary. You'll like it. It's called Abraham of the Desert. And my grandfather's name was Abraham Pressman. And I'll just tease it by saying he was a Russian immigrant who came through Ellis Island, learned the language, became a doctor, and found his way to the Japanese internment camp in Poston, Arizona during World War II. It's just an improbable tale, but that's kind of the peg. And Abraham of the Desert is the project, and I'm writing it right now. And when I'm ready to share, I'll be back on with you guys, and I'll blather on extensively about it. But let me jump off now, and I wish you guys both the best. Steve, I'll talk to you later, and hopefully we can see each other next week when I come to New England.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And we're gonna continue on this theme. Thanks. We'll see you later, Jake.
All right. Thanks for having me. Loved it.
Okay. It's funny that he's doing a show about his immigrant grandfather, because somewhere along the line, the immigrants married some blue bloods, because Jason's last name is Downey, and that is actually Downey, California. So they're like the founders of Downey, California, whenever that town came about. So he's a little bit of the old school, a little bit of the old country, and a little bit of the new country, a little bit of, the East and a little bit of Los Angeles. So, that's how a lot of us are. And we have interesting backgrounds, and, we have people in our family who've come from, have had real journeys. So, but, I also wanted to add this. We didn't get a chance to talk to Jake about this, but Jake went to high school at North Hollywood High with Adam Carolla and also Gary Paskowitz. And I've gotten to know and become good friends with several of Jake's friends. One of them, Randy Rosenblum, was on this show some months back, but I want to talk a little bit about Gary Paskowitz. Gary played high school football with Jake. Then he went to USC. He was there a few years after I was there. I got to know him through Jake. He started wearesc.com, which was a very, very successful website, especially during the Pete Carroll era. And they specialized in doing recruiting analysis of players throughout America who were being recruited by the Trojans. And of course, at that particular time, Pete Carroll was signing, 5-star blue chip recruits. He had the number 1 or number 2 recruiting class almost every single year, and from 2002 to 2008 or so. It was quite a time. But I met him. Unfortunately, Gary passed away, which was very sad. And I had gotten to become good friends with him. But, so we're talking about high school sports, Harper, and of course, that's something that's near and dear to your heart. And, you played at Notre Dame High. Who, in your mind, let's just give me 5 names that you think stand out as all-time great high school athletes in Southern California?
Oh my goodness. I didn't know that was coming. If I go back far enough, I can't imagine Jackie Robinson not being a phenomenal. At UCLA, he was everything. So football, basketball, track, baseball. So I would assume that he was an amazing high school. John Elway would be one of the first from Southern California that I got to. I never saw him play, but I knew he was playing at the same time that I was enrolled. I think he was a senior when I was a freshman at Notre Dame. He went to Granada Hills, of course.
I saw Elway and Jay Schrader go up against each other in a LA City semifinal game around 1979 or 78.
There was a legend named Dwayne Poley who went to Verbum High School. Fantastic. But you know what? Great high school player, but didn't develop, at least in my opinion. I don't know anything about what he did in college. I don't even know if he made it after his freshman year. But, the high school only experience. And I know there are thousands. I'm just thinking of guys that when I was there, you'd have to throw Anthony Davis in because he was a great high school player at 2 sports. There are several that are 3. Stuart Gray, who went to UCLA, was a great Valley kid. I'll stop there, just knowing that there are hundreds that are going, what about me? Pat Hayden at Bishop Amat, played well enough to be seen and ends up staying in the McKay household. There's such good friends with the McKay sons that he ends up living with them during his senior year, and then they all end up going to college together. Just let me off the hook by just saying I'll stop there.
Well, you definitely named several names. At least 2 of those names would have been in my short list. Elway, who I saw, and I actually was fortunate enough to even pitch against John Elway in college, and Jackie Robinson. I wrote a passion piece for Street Zebra magazine in 2000. I did a tremendous amount of research and created all-time high school baseball, basketball, football, and track teams. This included a lot of Olympians. And this was for the Millennium Edition in 2000. So it doesn't include the many great athletes who come since then. And part of this was incorporated into the LA Times coverage of Millennium Sports, which Bill Dwyer was kind enough to reprint. But the entire thing was printed out as a 7 or 8 page extravaganza in Street Zebra, which was a magnificent magazine in 1999, 2000. Unfortunately, they had poor management and didn't last. They went in the wrong direction as far as the internet was concerned, what they thought could make money on the internet. So it didn't make it. But boy, I really became an expert on high school sports. The internet existed, but really where I did my research, there's an incredible place. It's simply known as the library. It has a more official name, but it exists on West Adams Boulevard, kind of 2 miles west of the USC campus. As you're kind of approaching Culver City, as you're approaching West Los Angeles, that area. And they had more books and more research materials available for somebody like myself, and I practically lived in that place, not just for this article, but for others. So I had all kinds of magnificent names, and you had George Brett, you had Don Drysdale, you had, as you mentioned, Anthony Davis, Pat Hayden. I included other people who had played sports in Southern California and maybe have been famous for other things, like John Wayne, Tom Selleck, Richard Nixon, played high school football at Whittier High School. Kevin Costner played at my daughter's alma mater of Villa Park High School. And it was so much fun to go back and write about and research. And then, of course, after I wrote it, I got all kinds of letters from, you're missing this guy, or you're missing that guy, or it was really great. You mentioned Verbum Day High School. I had a guy named Raymond Lewis. I don't know if he played with this guy, Dwayne Pauly, but he was another superstar at Verbum Day, which was an absolute powerhouse in the 60s and 70s. I haven't heard anything about Verbum Day in the last 20 years or so. But Ray Lewis was a street player and a high school star. But he had a lot of troubles off the court. He did play at Cal State Los Angeles, where I think he scored 53 points in one game, which might have been an NCAA Division II record at the time. Played briefly for the Philadelphia 76ers. A lot of people read that, and it brought up a lot of memories of high school sports, because Southern California is the mecca of high school sports. There's no place that has produced as many Olympians, baseball, football, and basketball stars as Southern California. Fremont High alone, I believe, at least at one point, maybe someone's broken the record since, but they held the record for most Major League Baseball players out of one high school. A lot of that was in the 40s, 50s, Sparky Anderson, Dick Williams, a lot of great ball players.
Well, one of the things that I think would be even an add-on to the article that you were a part of is how many guys that didn't reach their peak or didn't achieve the level at 16 to 18 years old that others do, but went on and at 20 or at 21, whether it be in college or even in the big leagues or in the professional ranks, finally achieved something. And I remember specifically, there was one of my friend's father. We were over at the house just having, kids hanging out. And I was in college at the time, and the father said something. So you're playing? Yeah, I'm starting. You're starting in college. He questioned it. He didn't think I was good enough, and I'm not mad at that. It just, I knew at that moment that he didn't believe in me the way that I did, and I know there are a lot of kids that go through stuff like that, or when they look back on it, they go, I didn't have any talent back then. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I didn't know how to train. I didn't know how to lift. I didn't know how to study film. I didn't know how to hit a curveball. You know what I mean? And there's a growth and a maturation that experience, and hours and hours and hours and hundreds or thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours later, you get to be pretty good at something. So I would imagine that story would encompass a tremendous amount of individuals that said, yeah, I was on the field, but I sucked in high school. But wait till you see me now. You know what I mean? I bet you there are a lot of stories that are out there.
There's no question about that. And we've even had a few on our show. Just to give you one example, we had Bill Bordley on the show. Now, Bill Bordley was as good a high school pitcher as ever pitched in Southern California. He was also as good a college pitcher as ever played collegiate baseball.
Right.
But we don't know who Bill Bordley is. You and I do, because he went on, played a little bit in the big league, then he had an unbelievable second act as a Secret Service agent and director of security for MLB. So we are shedding no tears for the great Bill Bordley. Why did Bill not make it? I think his case was more about injury, but he was one of those guys who, like, he's 16, he's 17, and he's just lighting it up at Bishop Montgomery High. But then you take another guy, Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver was still playing junior varsity baseball at Fresno High School, and had absolutely no future in the game. And he joins the Marine Corps, and he gets bigger while he's in the Marine Corps. And he's on the Marine Corps baseball team, and he's like, I'm pretty good. I think I'm going to go to college on the GI Bill and see what happens. And the next thing you know, he's gotten a scholarship to USC, and the rest is history. And I could just imagine your situation.
Steven, let me stop you there real quick. For those who don't remember, the 2 years that he was in the Marine Corps, right? And this is during the Vietnam War, and he's preparing for this. He went through not only a growth spurt. We went from 5'10" to 6'2" or 3. I mean, he grew 4 or 5 inches while he was in the Marine Corps during those 2 years. But then he fills out and is training to do stuff at the highest level with the military and becomes a man. He went in as a boy and he became a man while he was in there. Is that a fair assessment with what happened with Tom?
It's 100%. And it was his psychological and maturity of the mind as much as maturity of the body, because you're in the Marine Corps and you're doing all these things, and you have to become a man if you're going to survive Camp Pendleton and what they do. And his body did this. His body did the same thing. He becomes 6. He goes from 5'4" to 6 foot, almost 6'1", and he goes from 140 to 205. And it's, like you say, all muscle. And he's already mastered baseball because it's a sport that he's loved his whole life, but he's had to learn how to pitch without a fastball. So he's throwing knuckleballs and hitting the corners and actually doing fairly well, in high school. And now all of a sudden he has a 100 mile an hour. Well, maybe the 100 mile an hour fastball came later. He just kept improving. I mean, he improved from junior college to USC, from USC into AAA, from AAA to his rookie year, to his Cy Young season in 1960. The guy was still getting better 2 years after he won the Cy Young Award.
Yeah. And there's so many other stories of different individuals. We stopped at Tom there for a moment. Please forgive me for derailing you. I know you had other things that you wanted to talk about. I just, he's not the only one. And there are hundreds, like I said, maybe tens of thousands of different stories for people that going, the regular high school experience, that didn't apply for me. It was great. Don't get me wrong. But I learned something afterwards that developed me in a different way that I was able to take advantage of. And that's the part that I think is so fascinating about this. And then obviously with Jake being on and his love and fascination with sports, and here he is as a mature man, he's in his early 60s, and he's talking about sports in high school in a way that he still has a passion for it.
Yeah, I mean, because I've done my share of coaching and scouting, so I know what it's like to be in the stands looking at a high school or college player. And what you're trying to do is to project where they're going to be, because we talked about this. When do you want to reach your peak? When you're 16 or when you're 23? Well, when you're 23, you're just getting to the major leagues or the NFL. And, I'm imagining that's what happened with you. You hit the weights, you learned how to work out, you became smarter, but you already had the drive and the intelligence and the desire. And, you come out of Notre Dame High, where I'm sure you had plenty of teammates who were really good, because I know that John Vella went there, and a lot of great athletes have played there, football, baseball. You go to Colorado State and you become a starter. And the next thing you know, you're playing 11 years in the National Football League. And there must have been a lot of really, really good athletes who you grew up with, beginning when you're 8 years old, all through high school and into college, who watched you play in the NFL and said to themselves, I was better than that guy when I was 17. Watching you play, so that's they say that the best revenge is living well, and that's living well, and I mean, I can remember being on the radio and talking about my latest book, and I'm thinking, there's some guy that I knew in junior high school who used to give me a hard time, who's listening to this right now, thinking I didn't get the best of Steve Travers. So, it's a lot of fun to, realize your goals, but it takes a lot of work. You have to just want it like nobody's business. And you did, and I did.
Well, you brought up a very interesting question a moment ago, and yes, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that go, "He sucked back then," regarding me. Well, how on earth did he make it? And I'm teasing there, but you brought up a very interesting point. Would you rather peak when you're 16 or when you're 23? I hope that most kids that go through something like that hope that that's not a one or the other choice. In other words, if I haven't peaked at 16. Or let's say just for Charlie Downey's sake, when we spoke to his father a little bit earlier, baseball ended very quickly because he was a smaller kid and he just didn't make the team when it came time for trying out for baseball. But he made the water polo team. So his 16-year-old experience, let's say, was a negative one. But now he's still playing water polo, at the collegiate level. Maybe he could be an Olympian someday. I don't know. I'm just saying that there's still something out there to where when he's 23, he can also peak there as well. But most kids, when that shutoff is made, they don't know what to do. They don't find something else. And that's, again, part of another story. Well, yeah, I couldn't play football, but I decided to be a basketball player. How did that work out for you, David Robinson? Or how did that work out for thousands and millions of others? Again, just looking at the possibility of how important high school is to find your niche and where you are able to excel. Even if in one avenue it gets closed, how does that open up in another area for you?
Well, I read an article in Sports Illustrated, I want to say around 1990 or 91, something like that, because I remember Greg Maddux was featured in it. And they talked about Greg Maddux, Roger Clemens, Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan, and a number of pitchers. And these are all Hall of Famers that we're talking about. And none of those guys were superstars at the high school level. None of them were drafted in the first round out of high school. They were good. In Seaver's case, he was completely unknown. Maddux was good. I think he was maybe a second or third round pick. Clemens had to go to a junior college. I talked to the scout who, he's not credited with signing Nolan Ryan. He was the baseball coach at Baylor, and we played Baylor when I was coaching at Cal. And he was telling my friend Bob Ralston, who's the third base coach for the Cal Bears, that he had scouted Ryan in high school. Maybe he was the bird dog, I'm not sure, but he said no, he probably threw about 85 in high school. So that great Nolan Ryan fastball comes later, and it was talking about the best pitchers are usually the ones, and we're talking pitchers here, but you can switch this over to other positions. But I think pitching is a unique aspect of sports because of the arm development and everything else. And in this particular article, most of the best pitchers were not, the big superstars. And there were many great superstars in high school. I mean, I played with a kid named Mickey Meister, and probably the best high school pitcher in America during that particular time. Yeah, he was drafted by the Red Sox, full ride to USC. I think he hurt himself his freshman year. He did have a good sophomore year, but he faded off. He played a little bit in the pros, and that was it. Did not get to the big leagues. His talent level, as far as I'm concerned, was Roger Clemens type. I mean, 6'5", 230, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. What more could you ask for? But there are a lot of kids like that. And so scouting is an inexact science. And, looking at a kid and projecting what he can be is not easy. And a lot of it, you really got to get into how hard they work, what their home life is like, because there are so many different factors that play into whether you're going to succeed. Hard work. I mean, I'd say hard work is 90% of it. Talent is great. You have to have the talent, but you must cultivate the talent with hard work.
There's a scene in the movie Moneyball, which I am grateful that they put so much of the scouting aspect of it. How are you going to build this team? Where Billy Beane, the character played by Brad Pitt, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember the actor's name, but he played Grady the scout, and they're having a discussion with one another, and it's right when Billy is ready to fire him, and Grady goes, Billy, you don't know what you're doing. And Billy says to him, you can't tell me, Grady, when you walk into some kid's house and meet with their parents that you know that this kid is going to be, you don't know. And I took something from that. Nobody knows if this kid's going to make it. How many times have you heard, Steven, can't miss, top prospect? Those are tags that he's a 5-tool player. And the guy may not want to play anymore. You can't measure the heart, and it's difficult to do that. So I appreciate you bringing that up here. And one thing about Maddox, before I forget, I remember an interview listening to Greg Maddox being interviewed by some reporter. Greg, when was the most difficult time for your pitching experience to where you had the most trouble getting people out? He goes, oh, that was high school. And the reporter was stunned with that. Well, high school? I thought it would be what? High school?
Yeah.
Because they swung at everything. So I couldn't get anybody out with the pitch that a player who's developed in the double or triple A, or certainly in the big leagues, he's not looking for that pitch. He's not going to swing at it. In high school, you swing at everything. And I thought, what a value to that. He had to learn how to get people out in a different manner than he would later on in his career. But still, he stowed that away in terms of his memory bank, which is, second to none in terms of how he would philosophize and put stuff together. Any comments on Greg and that? I saw you move around your chair a little bit. Does that resonate with you?
It does. It does. I can remember pitching to major league hitters when I was in the Oakland A's organization, and it really almost seemed, I don't want to say easier, but they're going to take, first of all, they're taking the first strike, as opposed to, and Pete Rose always said the same thing. He said minor league pitching was tougher to hit than major league pitching because they're wilder, they're more erratic, they're less predictable. When you get to the big leagues, especially if you've pitched a lot or you've played a lot in the major leagues, you're playing against athletes who you face over and over again. And the predictability of it doesn't make it easier, but it becomes, and if they're going to take that first pitch for a strike, then I'm going to throw it. And then I'm ahead 0-1. And I've always said, hey, once you're ahead 0-1, I've got you, because I've got an assortment of pitches that I'm going to get you out with. But you mentioned Moneyball. I was at the Moneyball premiere sitting next to Billy Beane, which was absolutely unbelievable. And I knew everybody in that movie. I either knew the actors who were portraying those people, or I knew the actual Grady Fuson, who you mentioned, was the pitching coach when I played at Idaho Falls of the Pioneer League. I knew Art Howe. I knew Mike Gillespie, the USC coach. He played Ken Maka, who at the time was he was a coach under Howe. And there were other scouts who were in that room. I knew every one of those guys. Chad Kruder was in that movie. I think he played a pitching coach. He was someone that I knew. So it was really unbelievable. And then when I went to the premiere, all those guys were there, and some of them I hadn't seen since I'd played in the minors. I remember Grady Fuson releasing me and says, if you really, really want to keep trying, I'd go to the Angels or somebody. And I remember telling him, I said, Grady, I've been accepted to go to the University of Southern California. I've done everything I can do in baseball. This is my second organization. I'm going to go to USC and get my education. And sure as heck, he actually apologized to me at the Moneyball premiere. Hey, I'm really sorry I had to release you. And I said, you don't need to apologize. I was injured. I went back to school. I got my degree, and I've written 30 books, or I think at the time more like 15 books. But yeah, the Moneyball does a great job. Remember in that movie, they show the young Billy Beane and the New York Mets scout saying, Billy, this contract represents what we think you can be as a 5-tool player. There's very rare players. And then we see a montage of Billy Beane wearing different uniforms because he's failed with every team that he's been on, throwing his helmet down, popping up, striking out, not happy. Didn't make it. Maybe he overthought it. Maybe he was too good too soon, and other players, Mark McGuire, for instance, he improved drastically from high school to college. I saw it. And so that's one of the reasons he made it. Along with his work ethic. But, even before he was doing all that stuff, he was lifting weights and he was working very hard because I saw it. I knew him at USC. You knew just from his attitude that was a guy who was going to make it.
Big dude. Obviously, when he's with the Cardinals near the end of his career, you're going, this guy is just muscled out, yoked. He looks like he should be in Muscle and Fitness magazine or competing at a Mr. Olympia and not playing baseball. But if you look at him his rookie year or see any pictures of him while he's at SC, he's a beanpole. He's still the same height, right? 6'4", 6'5", and a big dude, but just lean and skinny. But here's the point of why I'm bringing him up. At the high school level, I'm always at the impression you can't teach what you don't know. And if there's a coach out there that's teaching him how to swing and says, just swing, Mark, as opposed to here's where your feet are incorrect. You can be bending a little bit lower to use your legs more. You bat speed, Mark, you got to get your bat speed up. Just little things that any coach would tell any kid in terms of improving. There are guys that can do it at the best level. You had that in high school, and there are others that don't do it well at all. And I'm sure there are a lot of guys that are out there listening to this going, yeah, my coach didn't know doodly squat. I had to learn the hard way. There's nothing wrong with either one. I'm not blaming coaches, but I'm just saying it's so critical that someone would point a person in the right direction from a basics and fundamental standpoint, a technique level, versus another guy that says, I'm going to get you developed so that you can play at the next level because you've got what it takes already. It's a fine meshing between those two, between gas and clutch, and you don't always have a perfect fit, but you do the best you can with what you got.
Three of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League are Johnny Unitas of the Colts, Joe Montana of the 49ers, and Tom Brady of the Patriots. Unitas came out of, where did he go? He went to Louisville, but he's not from Louisville. Doesn't really matter. He was not a big high school star. He was not a huge star at Louisville. He did not get any offers to go into professional football out of college. He went into semi-pro, and from there got a tryout with the Baltimore Colts. And he gets there, and he's meshing at just the right time. And of course, we know what happened.
And he was a failure. He got cut by the Steelers, the worst team in the league for decades.
That's
Go ahead.
Right. Yes, exactly. Joe Montana out of Monongahela, Pennsylvania, was a good, solid high school quarterback, good enough to get a scholarship to Notre Dame. So that's really very impressive, but not good enough to be, hey, you're going to be a starter in your freshman year or even your sophomore year or even your junior year. He's still riding the pine, beginning his junior year. They finally give him a start third or fourth game of the season, and he takes the ball and he runs with it. And then he has the green jersey game against USC. So he's meshing with the Notre Dame system and his ability and his physical improvement at just the right time. And of course, we see what happens. Tom Brady was a better high school baseball player than football player. He was a catcher. Toronto Blue Jays signed him. Everybody who knows Tom Brady at Sarah High School in San Mateo, which is one of the storied high schools in America. Barry Bonds went there, John Robinson went there, Jim Fregosi went there, and many others. Anybody who knew him growing up in San Mateo would say, oh, Tom was going to be a baseball player. That was his sport. He was great. Wanted to be a football player. Now he gets a scholarship to Michigan, so obviously Michigan doesn't just hand out scholarships to anybody. So there's no question he was good, but he was not a can't miss. And he has to fight and struggle and fight to become the starter for the Wolverines. There's this other kid, his name escapes me, but he was considered the best high school athlete in the world, who was a Yankee minor leaguer and a Michigan quarterback, and Sports Illustrated did articles about him. But I can't remember his name because he fades into obscurity. Then there was Brian Greasy, who was ahead of Tom Brady. But Brady fights and struggles and eventually becomes a starter and has a big game against Alabama. 5th round draft pick of the Patriots, something like that. Barely even makes the team. He's not going to be a starter. Okay, maybe he's going to be a second string guy behind the kid from Washington State. What was that kid's name? Harper?
Ryan Leaf. Ryan Leaf is
no. Ryan Leaf was the kid who came out along with Manning. No, the starter at Drew Brees. No, not Drew Brees. It was Drew something or other. The kid out of Washington State who was ahead of Brady with the Patriots.
Oh, I was thinking it was Brock Hewitt. I got to look it up. Hold on, give me a second. I'm going to.
It was Drew something or other. He was a very good quarterback, and I think he went to another team and started for a few years, and I think he made All-Pro for some other teams, and he had signed for millions. So they had a lot invested in him, but he gets hurt, and Brady gets the job, and the rest is history. And there's many stories like that. You mentioned David Robinson. I think Robinson was a guy who was probably 6'5" coming out of high school. At 6'11", they wouldn't even have allowed him into the Naval Academy.
Hey, Drew Henson, Stephen. Drew Henson was the guy.
Well, yes, I think everybody's name is Drew. He was this phenomenal high school 2-sport, 3-sport guy who went to Michigan. I think George Steinbrenner had signed him for a big bonus. So he was a Yankee minor leaguer and a Michigan quarterback. And he faded. He didn't make it in either sport. Why? I don't know. I don't know whether it was work ethic. Probably there was some injuries. Injuries will kill you. I mean, how many great athletes have been injured? We had a guy on our show, Frank Ferroni, some time ago when I interviewed him at the College World Series. Absolutely magnificent high school baseball pitcher. Truly outstanding. The only thing about Frank, he was only about 5'10", and I think that size of his body, if he could have had my height, I think he would have gotten to the big leagues. It took so much torque to throw a baseball as hard as he did at only 5'10", and he hurt himself. And it wasn't work ethic or attitude, because he had a perfect attitude and a great work ethic. But he injured himself. He was at Cal State Fullerton on a team that won the national championship, but he was not one of their stars and never recovered from the injury and wasn't able to make it. There's so many like that.
Yeah, it's a very fragile world, I guess, if you want to put it that way, or it can be, in terms of what's the right fit for any kid in the high school level to be able to move up and get to the next level, and how good are you at the 14 or 15-year-old, JV or freshman team to be able to make it, or to be on a JV team or varsity team when you're a freshman. It's a very interesting world. Well, Steven, we've had a good time here talking. We had a shorter interview than what we wanted with your good buddy Jason, Jake, Downey. Give me some final thoughts here. Obviously, we could go down the high school road forever. We'll go back down again, but at least in terms of today, Jake does a great job. We talk more about family and taking advantage of every day rather than letting it take advantage of you. But his love and devotion to sports, and especially at the high school level, is certainly something that is genuine. It's unique and greatly appreciated by someone like the both of us who say, "Man, you keep it going."
Yes, well, Jake, of course, is a very good friend, and but when we get together, we're driving to Dodger Stadium, or I'm just hanging out at his house. The conversations invariably go to great high school players that we've seen, that he's seen, because he's seen them all, and I've seen a lot of them. And I've worked with Jake. I've done play-by-play with him, and I've been his assistant when he does a lot of his videography work. And we've covered Notre Dame High. We did a Notre Dame high school football game one time. St. Francis High School, Birmingham High School, Samo High. So he's a guy who's seen it all, and I'm a guy who's seen it all, and you're someone who's seen it all. Because when you're in sports, everybody went to high school, and we all played in high school, and it's a formative time. It's really amazing. I mean, college also is, but you look back at who your coach was and who your teammates were, and because when you're 14, you're just a child, and you enter high school, and you want to make your mark, and you want to be someone that years later people will talk about you. Yeah, I remember seeing that kid, and that's a big part of what high school is about. And they still talk about the teams that I played on, and I'm sure they're still talking about the teams you played on, because we both went to really legendary high school sports programs.
Well, it's interesting the way you put that in the high school level. I will call it a work-related endeavor, but at the college level, it becomes, I won't say it's a job, but there is a contract involved. You have to sign. You have to be initiated into a program. You have to be received, so to speak. There's an agreement that takes place. And I'm not saying you don't have that in high school, but it's a little bit different. There's a trade-off. You give your time, and they give you a scholarship at the college level. Well, you put work in, don't get me wrong, at the high school level. You learn how to do things in a way that's a little bit different, a little more efficient, a little more prototypically important for you to use. And these are skill sets that you're going to have. You're going to learn English. You're going to learn composition. You're going to learn nouns and verbs if you want to get into a literary aspect of your life at the high school level. Well, from a sports perspective, yes, you're going to train. You're going to be out on a track. You're going to learn how to run different races. You're going to run a mile. You're going to run a quarter. You're going to run 40s if you play football. You're going to learn to lift. You're going to learn long hours of practice. You're going to learn to study film. You're going to learn to stand around and imitate what other teams do. All of that is a part of the development. And so we get to talk a little bit about that today. And of course, Jake has been a part of that most of his adult life. And he's also now with his own production company discussing other things of sports value, of family value, and obviously everything in between. So we appreciate it. Final thoughts here, Steven, before we go.
Well, it's always fun to get on these freewheeling discussions with you, and of course with Jake earlier. But it's funny. My final thought is, you're talking about contracts. Yeah, you sign a contract when you get a scholarship to play in college. Well, that's happening in high school now. We could do a whole show about high schools. High school's the old college. Certainly the private schools, Mater Dei, St. John Bosco, De La Salle, St. Augustine's back in, I think, Fort Lauderdale, some of these really top schools in Texas that are, and now you have academies like IMG Academy. So you are signed, you are on a scholarship, you are on a contract, and you're a professional in high school.
Yeah.
That's how it is now. But despite that, no matter what, you can get a scholar. You know, some colleges are offering scholarships to kids in the 8th grade, but what are you getting? Because it gets back to what we said earlier. Can you project that they're really going to be that good by the time they get to college, by the time they're ready to be a starter? No, you can't. So you're taking a big chance doing that kind of thing. I'd much rather see the high school kid be allowed to be a kid and play a couple sports and have friends and not be put through a ringer of pressure at such an early age. Some of them maybe come out of it better, but I think not all of them.
Yeah. There's a passion level that sometimes disappears with the profession of sports. You don't want to do it as much because if it's not fun, and if it becomes too much, it can be overwhelming. So obviously a lot to talk about, and we'll do so more on later dates throughout the remaining time that Steven and I will be on together on Take 5 with Steven Travers. We appreciate everything that he does to contribute to the show for obvious reasons, and hope you enjoyed it as well. So for 100 Yards of Football, I am Harper LaBelle saying thank you for tuning in, everybody. Today, we appreciate it. With Take 5 with Steven Travers, our special guest has been Jake Downey. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties at the beginning of the show, but we appreciate you adapting along with us to try to make it as good as we possibly can. So we appreciate everybody being a part.